I'm just going to hand everything over to Mel, and thank you once again, Mel, and look forward to this great presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. It's very exciting to be part of the Guides Association of New York City's New York City Remembers programs. I thank you all for joining this presentation. Hope you enjoy it. When we think of 9/11, we can't help but think of death and destruction. Sometimes, though, from tragedy, some good can result. The good, when people come together to help one another. People create foundations or scholarships to perpetuate the memory of a loved one that often benefit others. The construction of edifices and memorials, memorial parks and playgrounds, which add beauty and pleasure to our world. Often when tragedy strikes, people make changes in their lives with more integrity and dignity. Over the past 20 years, this has happened to people and they have responded to the tragedies of September 11th in positive ways. In general, people have moved on and life has resumed. Much has occurred in New York City, the United States of America, and throughout the world. Memorials of all types have been created worldwide to perpetuate the slogan, "Never Forget," referring to those whose lives were lost and the first responders that gave of themselves to save others. Many made the ultimate sacrifice on that day, and others over the years succumbing to 9/11 related illnesses. In this presentation, you will learn about my personal experiences on September 11th and during the years that followed, but I'm going to make that very brief because it's more about the memorials. There will be a brief discussion of the Israelis who perished on 9/11/2001. You'll see 12 small memorials constructed through Israel. And finally, learn about the creation, construction, and dedication and meaning of the 9/11 Living Memorial Plaza in Jerusalem, with some extras thrown in. I worked in Tower 1 on the 73rd floor on 9/11. I had offices throughout the building in my career there. And Tower 1, for those of you that may not know, is the one on the left. And the way it is distinguished is because it has the antenna on top of it. And so was also on the head of Twin Tower 1, whose hoof I'm holding on to in the summer of 2000. And I know that the cows are back this year. So on Tuesday morning, September 11th, my day began differently than most work days. Instead of heading straight to the train station to come into the World Trade Center, I went to vote. It was a primary election day. After that, I caught a train to take me to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. September 11th became a day that would change my life in many ways. After the train pulled into the station, there was difficulty exiting at the World Trade Center subway station. There was commotion on the platform. People were mulling around, and there was crowding. It was difficult to get out of the train. When we got out, we saw unusually many people coming down the staircase from the concourse, which was the entrance to the Trade Center buildings. Finally, someone yelled, "There's a bomb in the concourse." Nobody knew what was going on. So two of the exits from the subway station went up into the concourse, but there was one on the north side of the train station that exited onto Vesey Street, just under what's called the survivor staircase. So we all lined up, single file, and walked up. And when I got out on the street, I saw the streets strewn with debris. It was horrible. And I was looking around, and I looked up at the north face of Tower 1, which is where my office was on the 73rd floor. And I saw a gaping hole between the 91st and the 103rd floor. And it looked like a plane. Coming out of that hole were fires and billowing smoke, and papers were just flying all over the place. Of course, I could not believe what I was seeing, and I walked across the street and became quite emotional. As I said, I had seen the 93 bombing, and this was a lot worse. After a while, I gained composure, and I decided I needed to go find the phone. There were no cell phones, or at least I didn't have one at that time, to call my family and let them know that I was not up there and I'm okay. So I started to walk east, and I kept walking a few steps, and I'd turn around and look back and more, and the papers kept flying out. And then after a little while, I saw amongst the papers, there were larger objects free falling. And I realized that those were people that either fell, or with the fires burning so hot, deciding what they had to do with their lives, or worse. Well, I kept walking, and when I was behind a tall building several blocks away, I heard a huge explosion. And I have a lot of blanks in my head. So even till this day, what exactly transpired in certain points, I usually was listening to a Walkman. I hope that all of you know what a Walkman is. It's a portable radio and tape player that with headphones. And I used to take it off when I got out of the train, but I just didn't remember when I took it off, put it on, but I was listening. Had I turned around, I would have seen a second plane hitting the South Tower. But I think that I imagined at that time that the explosion was an electrical transformer that was hit with the fires. At that point, all the phones were quite busy, and I remembered that I knew some people in an office a few blocks away on Nassau Street. And I decided perhaps maybe if I go up there, I'll be able to use their phone to call my family and let them know that I was okay. So I walked over there, and I went up to the 4th floor, and they were there and welcomed me. They wanted to, I was wearing my headphones by then because they all wanted to know what was going on, and they knew I was coming from there. And I told them, and we spoke, and they gathered around me. I made my phone calls, and then at 9:37, I heard that the American Airlines Flight 77 flew into the Pentagon, damaging the Pentagon. And well, at that time we didn't know, but we all know what happened now at this time. And then at 9:59, the entire building shook. Now, I've never experienced a very powerful earthquake, but this must have been what an earthquake felt like. And I heard on my Walkman that it was Tower 2, the South Tower, collapsing down in 10 seconds. And that created the dust cloud. And within moments, the entire building, I was in an inner office with windows to outer offices. And as we looked out the windows, it got completely pitch black out there. And after a while, the odor of the debris that was flying by, encircling the building, along with the entire downtown, was penetrating through the windows, which was all terrible, and we all know how terrible that was. Then I heard again the next event, United Airlines Flight 93, famous Flight 93, crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And then at 10:28, there was another earthquake. And I knew that was my building. And all my friends were there, my colleagues, my office, and I got quite emotional at that point. It was like, luckily I had all these people around me. At about 11 o'clock, we got a call from the manager of that office who hadn't made it in, telling us that they're reporting that there might be gas leaks. They're trying to evacuate Lower Manhattan. So we went down. And what I saw when I got downstairs was the street was covered with all the debris that had fallen, and it looked like newly fallen snow. And I decided, rather than going north in Manhattan, I would cross the Brooklyn Bridge. I thought of going to the hospital, to Beekman Downtown, see if I could help or if I knew anybody there. I desperately wanted to know what was going on in the buildings. But I thought it best to walk to the Brooklyn Bridge and start walking the Brooklyn Bridge as fast as possible. When I got to the bridge, it was strewn with all sorts of debris, clothing, shoes, attaché cases, backpacks, everybody that had run when those dust clouds formed and they were trying to run from those dust clouds had dropped everything so that would impede their running across the bridge. When I got to the other side, there were National Guardsmen with rifles. I don't know what they were looking for. Maybe they did. They were there to protect us, though. And people were saying they heard that there might be buses running from Williamsburg, the neighborhood of Williamsburg in Brooklyn. So I walked up there, and on the way, I saw that many businesses, public buildings, schools were opening up. They were handing out water. The public buildings were opening their facilities for the people that were trying to get away to use. Schools opened their auditoriums for people to sit down and rest a while. And I did go to a school, but there were no buses around there. And I spoke with some people, and we all decided to try to find the train station to see if the trains were running. So we did, and we did take the train. And when I got home about 4:30, I asked my wife, one of the first things, did she hear from anyone in my office, in my building? And she told me that yes, she did. In fact, she heard from my supervisor several times. He had left very quickly, and he got home, and he was trying to make an inventory of who he heard from or anybody else had heard from, and nobody heard from me, and except my wife, but nobody in the office had heard from me. So I was listed as one of the missing. And that's the way it was so confusing in New York City and probably all over the world for days. After that, I was involved in the 9/11 community. In 2007, when I retired from my first career, I began to volunteer at the 9/11 Tribute Center at that time, leading tours, viewing the area of the World Trade Center that was being, by that time, starting to be redeveloped. They were cleaning it up some more, but also they were starting to redevelop it. The plans had been not decided on, but put forth. And we talk about that at that time, but more about the Tribute Center a little bit later. So I'm leaving this schematic. and I did tell you my story. And this is the new One World Trade Center, 1,776 feet tall, to commemorate the year that we gained our independence. The following 5 people had Israeli citizenship and are counted as Israeli victims. ALONA AVRAHAM grew up in the Israeli port city of Ashdod. Her parents immigrated from Mumbai, at that time probably Bombay. Employed as an industrial engineer at Applied Materials in Israel, she was on her first trip to the United States. She visited with friends in Boston and had a fabulous time. Flying from Boston to Los Angeles to see the friends, she was on United Airlines 175, which crashed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. Leon LEBOR, on the left of this photo, was born in London, moved to New York, and worked as a furrier. Subsequently, he moved to Jerusalem, where his family had settled, and he worked as a florist in the King David Hotel, one of the luxury hotels in Jerusalem. LEBOR had a hearing disability. During his years in Israel, he had difficulty learning signing in the Hebrew language. So he returned to New York, where he worked for ABM Industries as a custodian in the World Trade Center. Leon was well liked by colleagues and tenants at the World Trade Center. Despite his difficulties, he made a life for himself, living in Jersey City, having a job, and making friends. He was always joking, according to his brother, and making people laugh. He loved what he did, and he went over and above what was necessary. His family had to perform mourning rituals twice, once when it was determined that he had perished, and again when parts of his body were identified. This was not an uncommon occurrence among victims. Some families had to hold several funerals because body parts of their loved ones were found and had to be buried at different times. Some people just said they didn't want to have any more. Although LEBOR is listed as was an Israeli, some of the websites I checked had it listed him as British. And sadly, a number of the memorials in Israel do not include him as an Israeli. SHAI LEVINHAR grew up in Neve Manason, an Israeli community just north of Ben Gurion Airport. SHAI came to the United States in 1996 with his new wife. After SHAI completed an executive MBA program early in 2001, his wife gave birth to a little daughter. On September 11th, SHAI was on the North Tower, 103rd floor, where he was an assistant vice president at eSpeed, a subsidiary of Cantor Fitzgerald. His daughter was just 6 years old. In a New York Post article, SHAI's father was quoted as saying, "Later, we got a letter from a Cantor Fitzgerald employee who said his life was saved because SHAI forced him that morning to go to a training course out of the office." Daniel LEWIN is considered to be the first person murdered in the terror attacks on September 11th. He was born in Denver. His family moved from the United States to Israel when he was just 14 years old. An exceptional individual, Danny trained for 4 years and became a member of Sayeret Matkal, Reconnaissance Unit 269, the most elite IDF commando unit, where he earned the rank of captain. Danny was brilliant, particularly in mathematics. In 1996, he graduated from the Technion, the elite technical college in Haifa, Israel, earning 2 bachelor's degrees. While at the Technion, he also worked for IBM, responsible for developing high-level advanced computer systems. He moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts to attend MIT in a PhD program. At MIT, along with his advisor, Danny developed some very sophisticated algorithms for optimizing internet traffic. These algorithms were the basis for Danny and his advisor to start an important technology firm in 1998. The company was very successful. Danny boarded American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11th to fly to Los Angeles for a business meeting. Through information received by telephone from a flight attendant, Betty Ang, that Danny sensed something was wrong when he noticed two men acting with inappropriate behavior. One turning out to be Muhammad Atta, the mastermind of the terror plot, who was seated several rows in front of him. The men were speaking Arabic, which Danny understood. Being trained for Sayeret Matkal, he may have gotten up to confront them. What he didn't know was that one of the other terrorists was sitting right behind him. The terrorist stabbed him when he got up. Thus, he was identified as the first casualty of the day. Danny Lewin left a wife and two sons. He was posthumously named one of the most influential figures in the internet age. An intersection in Cambridge was renamed Danny Lewin Square. Many other honors were bestowed in his name. He was multi-talented and could have had a bright future. And finally, Chagai Sheffi, who was a wonderful, caring person. He was a terrific negotiator and an intelligent businessman. He began to show interest in business at the age of 5 by negotiating terms and conditions with a grocery store owner in Israel, offering the grocer that he would guard the ice cream freezer in the store to be sure that everyone taking ice cream would pay in exchange for one ice cream each day. Chagai was awarded a BA in economics and an MBA from Bar Ilan University. He excelled in the IDF and rose to the rank of captain in the Israeli army. After moving to the United States in 1992 with his wife, he held high-level jobs in several internet and financial firms. In the spring of 2001, Chagai co-founded a firm that developed software for financial systems. On September 11th, he was scheduled to be a lead speaker and a panelist at the breakfast meeting at Windows on the World on the 106th floor of Tower 1. Nobody survived from there. When American Airlines Flight 11 struck the tower, Chagai knew he would not survive and called his wife to say goodbye to the family he loved. Chagai and his wife had 2 children, a son and a daughter. His parents were responsible for getting many of the 9/11 memorials constructed in Israel. Throughout Israel, there are at least 13 memorials dedicated to the victims of 9/11. On this map, you can see that many of them are centered around the coastline and around Tel Aviv, where the population is greatest. But they do run the gamut from north to the very southern tip. And we'll look at them now. This is a circle, a traffic circle in a residential area called Neve Savion in Or Yehuda. This is the community where Chagai Sheffi's family resided. It was dedicated on September 3rd, 2003. Here is the street view. This is in Herzliya. It was dedicated on May 17, 2005. It's an oval-shaped stone divided in half, possibly representing the Twin Towers. It's in a traffic circle called New York Square. I was able to visit the memorial in Herzliya on a trip in 2012. I've been to several, and you'll see which ones. This is a close-up of the plaque in Herzliya. Nes Ziona is a community south of Tel Aviv. 2 shiny white forms, which I'm not sure what they were made of, maybe stone, twisting around each other in a public park in a residential neighborhood. It was dedicated on November 30th, 2001, was probably the first one. In Ashkelon, another port city, there's a plaque right here among 7 palm trees in a park area, also called New York Square. It was dedicated on October 7th, 2003. And here's a close-up of that plaque. And the Kikar, New York is, Kikar means square, so it's New York Square. Many of them are named New York Square. This memorial memorializes the thousands of victims of the September 11, 2001 vicious terror attack. 4 Israelis are listed. This is in Eilat, which is a beautiful resort city on the Red Sea, adjacent to Aqaba, Jordan. It was dedicated on September 4th, 2003. The two reddish brown, rusted probably, metal columns represents the Twin Towers in a circle named Migdalei HaTeormim Square, or Twin Towers Square. I visited in 2014 when we vacationed in Eilat. And this is the plaque mounted on a stone. It memorializes the Israelis and all the thousands of victims and connects the citizens of Eilat and those of the city of New York and the United States. This is I particularly like this one. In Beersheba, which is in the largest city in the Negev, which is the southern part, the more desert type land of Israel in Israel. It was dedicated September 13th, 2005. And this is a view looking up from the street to the top of the memorial toward the sky. And they look like twin towers, very much so. They're even laid out that way, catty cornered to each other. It's in a residential area, and I took this photo on the memorial when I visited in 2012 as part of a tour of the Negev. And this is the plaque in Beersheba. Again, Twin Towers Circle and Kikar. In Ashdod, a large public park has a plaque in the distance. We can't see it here. Ashdod was the home of ALONA AVRAHAM, who was on United Flight 175. And this is the plaque. It's the plaque, the flags of the United States and Israel, and Twin Towers down on the bottom. I apologize for the poor quality of the photo. In Yehud, a public park in the Neve Monosson neighborhood where SHAI LEVINHAR was born and lived, it was dedicated on the eve of Israel Independence Day in the spring of 2005. That memorial includes 4 different parts. This stone is one, the trapezoidal stone with metal plaques, which reads Lizkarim, to their memory, and lists 21 names. I don't know the names, but they're not all 9/11 victims. The other parts of the memorial are a plaque down here, and also looks like on rusted metal, in memory of 9/11 victims, including the four Israelis on the bottom right here. A child's playground in memory of SHAI LEVINHAR, who came from this area. And this is an abstract sculpture representing the Twin Towers with bird cutouts, I guess the birds flying around the Twin Towers. Another city south of Tel Aviv, Rishon LeZion, this memorial is on a traffic circle. It was dedicated September 11th, 2007. It has 2 rectangular pillars representing the Twin Towers and a wreath, all carved out of white stone. The wreath has imprints of flowers, and the island is planted with bushes and trees. I've seen more recent photos, and the bushes have grown, obscuring some of the memorial. This is a close-up of one of the pillars. There are, on both pillars has this. There are hands carved into the pillars, looking as if people are trying to grab onto the towers, trying to hold it. Trying to hold themselves up, I guess. The text reads again, Nigdale Teamim, to the Twin Towers, in their memory with a list of names. At Bar Ilan University in Ramat Gan, which is just east of the northern part of Tel Aviv, one of the gates was named the Chagai Shefi Gate. It was dedicated on September 1st, 2010. The rectangular pillars in the image of the World Trade Center towers form the gate at the entry to the amphitheater on campus and a park. And this is the plaque there. In addition to Chagai, the plaque pays tribute to all Bar Ilan students killed in terror attacks. Chagai Shefi's name is also on the memorial of the Ministry of Defense building in Tel Aviv. It was dedicated on April 25th, 2012, by then Minister of Defense Ehud Barak. In Haifa, which is in the north, also a city on the Mediterranean, it was dedicated in 2005 in honor of Alexander Braginsky by his mother. It consists of these memorial pillars, a playground, and a park along the shore of the Mediterranean. And a close-up of one of the pillars. You can see the children's playground in the back, and you could see one of the benches in the park. This is an unusual story. Alexander Braginsky immigrated to Queens, New York with his mother from Odessa in 1979 at the age of 16. He attended Queens College, which led to a successful career. On September 11th, he was employed by Reuters Financial Services as a foreign exchange products manager. He was scheduled to speak at the lecture at the conference on the Windows on the World. He was filling in for a colleague who couldn't make it that morning. His lecture was on job education for newcomers to the Association of New Americans. You can see, and you may have heard of so many stories where people were filling in or people weren't there because somebody took their job or whatever. Alex lived in Stamford, Connecticut. He was a perfectionist who was set in his ways, but with a good heart. His biographies and memorial pages said that he wanted to give back to the United States because the US gave him everything. He lived his life with grace and dedication. His mother tried to gain access to the World Trade Center following the attacks on 9/11, but was turned away. On the following day, she started visiting hospitals where bodies had been taken, looking for her son, her only son. The same day, she found out that Alex's wallet was found at the Trade Center site. He was an only child, and his mother wanted to perpetuate his name, so she dedicated the memorial park in Haifa. She also established a scholarship fund in his name at Queens College to provide for students of Russian heritage, as well as endowing a conference room in his name at the college. She also succeeded in convincing Reuters to establish an endowment to buy Russian literature and journalism books for the college library. Each book is imprinted with a photo of Alex superimposed over the Twin Towers, which is depicted on this slide, which is right here. I was able to get a copy of it. His name also appears on the September 11th Memorial Square Monument in Coney Island, dedicated to the victims of Russian descent who lost their lives at the World Trade Center. Now for the 13th and the largest memorial in Israel. It's the only memorial outside the US that includes the names of all the victims of the September 11th attacks. They are written on the plaques around the plaza. which makes it unique to the international community. And a good number of these, the following photos and the information was taken from a slideshow produced by Igal Morag, and I thank him for it. And some of the others were added by myself. The Israel Coins and Media Corporation requested that Eliezer Weishaupt, an internationally acknowledged Israeli artist and sculptor, create a medal honoring the victims of the horrific events of September 11th. Weishaupt decided that an event of that magnitude of the terror attacks warranted not only a medal, but a memorial, which would pay tribute to all the victims of September 11th. He presented his idea and his concept to the then mayor of Jerusalem, Ehud Olmert, and to the Jewish National Fund, JNF. Both eagerly embraced the project. Weishaupt created this model of the monument that he was hoping to build. These are general concept sketches that Eliezer Weishaupt did. The site chosen by JNF in April of 2009, it took 8 years to do that, was on a lovely hill overlooking the Arazim, or Cedar Valley, on the outskirts of Jerusalem. JNF also provided an access road to the site. Only then could work commence. By the time the site was chosen, the completion of the construction of the memorial was thought to be almost impossible to construct in only 8 months, until the dedication day, which was chosen to be in November of 2009. We'll see. The site was chosen to have a direct view of Jerusalem's main cemetery, Har HaMenuchot Cemetery. It also is in close proximity. This is the cemetery here. It also is in close proximity to the right-of-way of the fairly new Tel Aviv-Jerusalem high-speed rail. In order to minimize the impact on the forest area when they were both being constructed at the same time, so therefore they would be able to do the construction alone. Of course, the memorial was completed significantly sooner than the train. A model of the actual physical site plan, including the memorial, was constructed in Weishaupt's studios. The 8 years that was envisaged that went by until this was erected on site. During that time, various issues had to be addressed, including bureaucratic issues, opposition from environmental agencies, various site location changes, funding issues, and obtaining necessary permits. In the city of Netanya, the artist created a full-scale foamed plastic model of the memorial sculpture. This would enable him to construct the mold from which he would cast the actual bronze sculpture. Here is the bronze sculpture itself, surrounded by all the people who helped to create it. Not sure what part of the dog played, except maybe companionship. During May through August, preparation of the site, initial groundwork, and drilling and placement of the steel reinforcing rods for the foundation of the memorial in the plaza took place. In August, the exterior walls were laid out and the forming for the concrete was placed. I'm an engineer, so this may be a little geared toward engineering and construction, but in September, the entire site began to take form. A team of workers worked more regularly on a daily basis. The concrete forming was completed and the area was transformed into an impressive building site. In mid-September, a pump truck was set up and a cement mixer brought the cement to begin the huge casting operation of the outer walls, continuing into darkness. Here, the large cement pump truck shoots out concrete right here, see, in between the forms, for the casting of the outer perimeter wall and the Memorial Plaza, which continued daily into October, while the inner walls began to be cast as well. On the ground of the plaza, there was concrete and stone pavers were being placed. I think it was all Jerusalem stone, because in Jerusalem, the law is, I believe, that you have to build everything in stone, in Jerusalem stone. At the same time, in addition to the construction work on the plaza, the monument itself began to take shape. The two half sections of the exterior metal cladding, the monument is bronze, this is aluminum. For the concrete base of the monument were trucked in. They were unloaded, and the crane, with its extended long arm, right here, lowered each of the two halves onto the plaza. Joined together and welded as one piece, the cladding was slowly placed over the concrete base. Here is Yechiel Cohen, the landscape architect of J&F, as he stood on the base of the monument and took final measurements to ensure that all was placed according to the plans. He was very hands-on. When I visited Jerusalem in February of 2012, I had the honor of being brought to the completed 9/11 Living Memorial in Jerusalem by a J&F representative. When I arrived, the chief landscape architect, Yechiel Cohen himself, was there to greet me and gave me a tour of the site. In mid-October, the placement of the paving stones was completed, extending to the perimeter of the plaza. The 8-ton monument itself was then brought in, lifted from the truck, moved, and carefully lowered onto the base of the size by a sizable crane. This was a monumental task and took about 2.5 hours, well past darkness. The collar connecting the monument to the base was placed, and this is how it looked during the day. We saw it at night. The completed bronze monument stands 30 feet tall. The statue consists of a US flag with its folds creating a likeness to a memorial flame, suggesting an eternal flame. The flag stripes flow upward toward the sky and create a sense of movement and power. There are 14 cast metal plates on which all the 2,978 names who perished that day, of people who perished that day, are written. They're in embossed lettering according to alphabetical order and was surrounded again by Jerusalem stone. This is one of the 14 plaques. So multiply this by 14. This is how many people perished. Now, I went through these names, and there was probably around 9 or 10 people that I know this. I know their families. I know stories about them, or I possibly worked with them. I did. There were several people here that I knew from my organization. By November 5th, 1 week before its dedication ceremony, the memorial was almost complete with just some minor items to finish up and clean up the site. This is a close-up of the monument base. It shows a window right here through which one can view a small piece of the actual Twin Towers rubble. Over 1,000 pieces were given out by the Port Authority around the world for memorials. It's a remnant of crumpled steel. You can probably see it's rusted steel. The inscription on the base is written in Hebrew on the left side and in English on the right. In English, the inscription reads, "The metal remnant was taken from the remains of the Twin Towers that imploded in the September 11, 2001 disaster. It was sent over to Israel by the city of New York to be incorporated into this monument. This metal piece, like the entire monument, is a manifestation of the special relationship between New York and Jerusalem and an expression of gratitude to Keren Kayemet Israel and Jewish National Fund, whose initiative and the generous contribution of its supporters made this monument possible." By November 5th, 1 week, oh, I think I had this slide twice. Okay, never mind, sorry. The memorial lists the names of all the 2,978 victims murdered on September 11th. Standing on its base, it's 30 feet high, and in the center of the Memorial Plaza, which extends out to an impressive size. It's quite a sight. It's surrounded by decorative landscaping and has stone benches here for people to sit and reflect on the view of the beautiful vistas. All is accessible to the physically challenged, and you can see these ramps, and they wind up here. They can either sit on the top step or have their wheelchairs here, or come in, it comes down and come into the memorial to get the close-up, and here are the 14 plaques. In 2013, while I was again on a tour of Israel, I was asked to speak to the tour group at the Jerusalem Living Memorial about my 9/11 experiences and to describe the plan for the, at that time, future World Trade Center site in New York City. I'm describing a rendering of what was proposed to be built. And this is the dedication ceremony. It was quite moving. I was not there. These are Mr. Morag's photos. At the beginning of the ceremony, as trumpets sounded taps, both the Israeli and American flags were lowered to half-staff. Speakers included former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who had supported the building of the memorial from the very beginning when he was mayor of Jerusalem. Some others who participated in the ceremony were Haggai Sheffi's family. Flag bearers, who included firefighters and members of other service organizations, carried flags which were printed with the flags of the 92 countries of the victims and placed them around the plaza, further emphasizing the motif of the furled flag of the monument itself, which is right here. Wreaths were placed by members of the Israeli Knesset, their parliament, officials from the United States Embassy, representatives of various religions, and members of the victims' families. Here, religious representatives, the Chief Rabbi Yonah Metzger, and the Greek Orthodox Archbishop Elias Shakor are approaching with the wreath. Another wreath. Oh, I did that one. A girls' choir led the singing of the national anthems of both the United States of America and the State of Israel. At the culmination, white doves were released, closing the ceremony and signaling peace. Very impressive. And actually, you see a few doves here, but other pictures I've seen, they had a lot of doves. They were flying all over the place. And that's the end of the ceremony. Just a little bit more. The sculptor Eliezer Weishaupt also created this stamp and this token, and they were sold in Israel, both commemorative. I think this is what they originally wanted him to do, but he built it into something even greater. In 2007, I began volunteering at the 9/11 Tribute Center, leading tours of the 9/11 National Memorial at the World Trade Center, even before it was completed. So we gave tours walking through the adjacent financial center, looking through the windows and describing where things were, the history, our experiences. The Tribute Center was the first 9/11 museum to open in the area. In June of 2017, the 9/11 Tribute Center moved to larger quarters in a different location. It became known as the 9/11 Tribute Museum. It is located at 92 Greenwich Street in Manhattan, 3 blocks south of the World Trade Center. Less intense than the 9/11 National Museum, the smaller 9/11 Tribute Center was the first to open. Tribute's emphasis is on person-to-person stories woven into the presentation of factual information about the events of the 1993 and 2001 attacks and their aftermaths. The 9/11 Tribute Museum offers premier walking tours of the 9/11 Memorial and the World Trade Center site, led by family members, survivors, first responders, rescue and recovery workers, people who lived and worked in the area of Lower Manhattan, and others who directly experienced the events of the attacks on the World Trade Center. The Pentagon, we actually have a person coming once a month from the Pentagon, or did before COVID anyway, and the field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. These docents also shared their stories in the museum galleries. Besides offering factual information, they had another focus in the new museum. The museum opened in 2018. And that is the spirit of resilience, compassion, and service that arose following the attacks, and seeks to inspire others to honor the legacy of these actions through volunteerism and acts of kindness to others. This summer, the 9/11 Tribute Museum welcomed its 5 millionth visitor since its original opening at the Tribute Center in 2006. And that was my plug for the Tribute Museum, a very worthy organization. Thank you for attending, and I'll take questions now.
Well, thank you, Mel. That was very moving, both sharing your own personal experience during 9/11, very moving experience in the way that I'm sure it was difficult for you to revisit that, but also sharing the stories of the victims and also the great and beautiful and moving designs of the various monuments, especially the large one that you talked about, the plaza. Are there any questions? Can write it in chat or Q&A. I did have a question, Mel, actually. I was a little bit confused about, you mentioned the one gentleman who lived in Jersey City and he had a hearing impairment or something like that.
Yes.
And then they mentioned that there's only 4 victims on some of the memorials. Why did just his family didn't inform officials?
For some reason, because he was born in London, perhaps, when his stories came out, that was talked about, and people took it that he wasn't included. I don't know the real reason that they didn't include it, but what I've read is that a lot of articles and things counted him as a British subject. So I was unfortunate. It was terrible, but and actually there was another person on one of the other plaques that I found, but he was an American and that happened to live in Israel for a few years, but he's not an Israeli citizen.
All right. Well, Nina also thanks you for the moving and informative presentation. And I suspect that
Nina.
A relative of yours, and perhaps named Michelle, she has the last name of Wasserman. So I suspect it. Yeah. I did want to point out, you mentioned the dog. there was a dog who actually perished in 9/11, serious,
Serious.
lab, yeah, and so
Yes, I know his handler, David.
oh, Lieutenant Kim, yeah.
David Lim. Yes, he worked for the Port Authority, and he retired a few years ago. I'm still in touch with him. And great guy.
Yeah,
He was devastated.
I can imagine. But then there were also they were part of the rescue effort as well. There were a number of canines so I just, when you mentioned that picture of the black lab who was part of the effort, I thought maybe that was a nice token gesture towards their contributions.
If I can say, you probably have read this, that the canines that were not coming up finding anything were really very sad, because that's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, everybody is just so appreciative of you, Mel, sharing your story and sharing the stories of all of the victims from Israel and all of these really moving monuments. And like you said, I think the opening ceremony for that plaza was very moving as well. All right. I hope all of our participants, maybe you can look to see some of the other offerings. Of course, there's so many moving stories to be shared about 9/11, and we have a lot of GANIC members who've stepped up and want to contribute to memorializing this as New York City remembers. So thanks so much, Mel. This has been
I can
recorded.
just add one other thing. I
Yes,
mean,
of
my
course.
family that's here, thank you. No, but I mean, this has been my life for the past 20 years. I didn't mention in my story, because I was trying to make it short and just about made the time of an hour. I spent the first year after 9/11 just going through every newspaper and magazine, books, and right here in this room, all about the people and the stories. And I just was looking at all these biographies and things of people, and looking at their faces to see if I recognized them, and I found them. In fact, one day I saw the picture of the security guard who was at the elevator that I used going up to where my office was. Greeted us with a big smile every day. He had 4 children. His wife was expecting the 5th. He was a security guard, and I was the kind of guy, he was helping people, and he died. So I, with some of my colleagues, started like a GoFundMe kind of thing. And we did raise some money, and we got some extra stuff. And I know we went up after she gave birth, and the baby was small. We went up to Lenox Avenue to the apartment, and we brought her the check and some candy and flowers and stuff for the kids, and she was very much appreciated. But I remember it was a dingy apartment, that the living room was dark, but there in the corner was a picture of Sammy Fields in a beautiful white suit. He was a singer, he sang in the church, and it lit up the room. He lit up, his smile lit up the room. I'll never forget that.
So beautiful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's yeah, Sammy Field. So yeah, like you say, the cascade of names, every single name has these stories behind it that are just always so moving. And I can understand how it could consume you for the rest of your life, having lived through that and known so many people that died that day. Well, thanks again, Mel. Like I said, this has been recorded, and we'll make sure to get the recording out, and hopefully more people can see this. I know it's been a busy weekend, but I'm so appreciative of your effort. There is something in Q&A. Melissa says, thank you for this session. Okay, great.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining.
All right. Thanks again, and take care.
You too. And good luck the rest of the week.
Thank you.